The first attack came without warning, shattering the quiet night of the frontier colony. Towers of metal and light crumbled as alien ships tore through the skies, raining fire on everything below. People ran in panic, their voices drowned out by the roar of engines and the cracking of burning steel. No one knew where the enemy had come from or why they had chosen to strike here, but the destruction was merciless. Among the chaos, a young human soldier named Kane moved through the smoke-filled streets, guiding civilians to safety. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning for movement. The air smelled of scorched metal and ash, and the ground trembled under the constant bombardment. In his earpiece, broken transmissions from other squads confirmed the phone. Same contact everywhere, no clear defense line. He knew their small outpost could not withstand a force of this size. A blast tore open the road ahead, throwing Kane to the ground. Dust and heat hit his face, but he pushed himself up, rifle ready. Through the haze, a massive shape emerged. It was like nothing he had seen before, an alien beast, towering over vehicles, its hide covered in dark scales that shimmered with faint energy. Its eyes glowed a deep, burning red, and each breath came with a guttural growl. Around its body, scars glistened as if the wounds were older than the war itself. It moved slowly, almost limping, yet its presence radiated danger. Kane aimed his weapon, finger hovering over the trigger. But then he noticed something strange. The creature was not charging or attacking. Instead, it swayed slightly, its head lowering toward the ground as if its strength was slipping away. Every instinct told Kane to fire, yet something in its movement stopped him. This was not the posture of a predator about to strike. It was the stance of something in pain. From the nearby wreckage, alien infantry appeared, their armor reflecting the orange glow of the burning buildings. They advanced toward the beast, weapons drawn, shouting in their own tongue. Kane could not understand their words, but their intent was clear. They meant to finish it off. For a moment, he hesitated. If the beast was their enemy, letting them kill it might be the safest choice. But deep inside, an urge he couldn't explain told him this was wrong. The creature's pain was too real, too alive to ignore. As the aliens closed in, the beast let out a low, rumbling sound, not of rage but of resignation. Its eyes flickered weakly, and its massive frame trembled. Kane's chest tightened. He had seen wounded soldiers before, men who had given everything and were ready to let go. This was the same, only on a scale far greater. Against his training and every rule of war, Kane moved between the beast and its attackers, raising his weapon toward the incoming soldiers. The alien troops halted, momentarily confused. Kane's heart pounded as he shouted in their direction, making it clear he would fight if they advanced. One of them barked an order, and the rest began to spread out, preparing to flank him. Kane knew he couldn't hold them off for long. The beast behind him gave a slow exhale, its breath hot against his back. He glanced over his shoulder and met its gaze. For a brief moment, the burning red softened, and he saw something unexpected: recognition. Gunfire broke the moment. Kane dove for cover as energy bolts scorched the air. The beast, startled, lifted its head with a deep growl. Its massive tail swept across the ground, knocking one attacker aside. But the movement cost it. Kane saw fresh blood seep from an old scar, the glow in its eyes dimming further. He could feel its life slipping away, and a thought burned in his mind: if he left it here, it would die. And for some reason, that felt like losing something more important than he could explain. The fighting grew more intense. Kane's weapon hummed with each shot, but the enemy was relentless. He realized they weren't here just to kill him. They were determined to end the beast's life at all costs. And that raised a question he couldn't shake. If these aliens feared the creature this much, then what was it? A weapon? A guardian? Or something far older and far more dangerous than either side understood? In that moment, Cain made his choice. He wasn't going to let it die, not here, not like this. Even if it meant defying orders, even if it meant standing alone against an army, he would protect it. Without knowing why, he felt this was the beginning of something far larger than a single battle, and he wasn't about to walk away. Cain's chest rose and fell rapidly as he kept firing at the advancing alien soldiers. The heat from the burning buildings made the air shimmer, distorting his view. His ears rang from the constant noise of battle, but he could still hear the low, rumbling breaths of the beast behind him. It was wounded badly, but even in its weakened state, its presence was immense. Each step it took caused the ground to vibrate slightly, a reminder of the power it still held beneath all that pain. The aliens pressed forward, moving with precise coordination. Cain realized they were not reckless fighters but trained warriors, and their focus was entirely on the creature. They shouted to each other in a language he could not understand, but their hand signals and formation shifts were clear. They wanted to surround him and cut him off from the beast. If they succeeded, the creature's fate would be sealed. Cain gritted his teeth, shifting his position to block their path. Suddenly, the beast let out a deep, guttural roar that made the soldiers falter. Cain turned to look at it and saw its eyes flash with renewed intensity for a brief moment. It was as if the roar was not a threat, but a desperate call for help. Cain's instincts screamed at him to run, to leave this fight behind. But something deeper told him to stay. There was a connection forming, though he could not explain how or why. It was like the beast was speaking to him without words. An energy bolt struck the ground near Cain, sending dirt and debris into the air. He ducked and rolled behind a chunk of collapsed wall. The beast shifted closer, shielding him with its massive body. Cain could feel the heat radiating from its skin and hear the strain in its breathing. It was fighting to stay standing, each inhale rougher than the last. Cain glanced at the dark wounds on its side, realizing that if something wasn't done soon, it wouldn't survive much longer. The aliens regrouped, forming a line and raising their weapons. Cain's rifle was almost out of charge, and he had no grenades left. His options were running out. He searched the area quickly, spotting a narrow path between two destroyed buildings. If he could get the beast to move through there, they might be able to escape the immediate fight. But convincing a creature of its size to follow him, especially in its condition, would be a challenge. He would need to earn its trust fast. Cain stepped into the open, holding his rifle ready while slowly backing toward the gap. He kept his eyes locked on the beast, pointing toward the path and calling out in a calm but firm tone. The creature's gaze followed his gestures, its expression unreadable. For a moment, Cain thought it wouldn't move. Then, with a slow and heavy step, it began to follow. The aliens reacted immediately, shouting and breaking formation to intercept them. Cain knew he had only seconds to make this work. Blaster fire filled the air as Cain sprinted backward toward the gap. The beast moved behind him, using its bulk to knock aside debris in their way. One alien tried to cut them off, but the creature swung its head and sent the soldier flying into a burning wall. Cain could see the path opening up ahead, a small chance for survival. He shouted louder, urging the beast to keep moving, and to his surprise, it responded faster. As if understanding his urgency, they reached the gap just as a barrage of energy bolts hit the ground behind them. Cain dived into the narrow space, the heat of the explosions at his back. The beast squeezed through, scraping its armored hide against the walls, leaving deep gouges in the stone. Once through, they found themselves in a quieter section of the ruins, shielded from the main battle by collapsed structures. Cain collapsed to one knee, breathing hard, the adrenaline still pounding through his veins. The beast lowered its head. Beside him, exhaling in a long, shuddering breath, Cain slowly reached out, his hand hovering just above its skin. He hesitated, unsure if touching it would provoke a violent reaction. But something in its eyes, something almost human, pushed him forward. His fingers brushed against its rough, warm hide. The beast flinched slightly, but did not pull away. In fact, its breathing seemed to slow, and the tension in its massive frame eased. Kane realized then that his touch was not just tolerated but welcomed. For the first time since the attack began, Kane felt a strange sense of calm. The bond between them had shifted from uncertain to undeniable. This creature, once a terrifying force in his eyes, was now something he was determined to protect at all costs. And though the war raged on outside these ruins, in this moment, Kane knew he had gained an ally unlike any other. Kane kept his hand on the beast's hide for a few more seconds, feeling the slow rise and fall of its breathing. The heat from its body was intense, mixed with the faint scent of scorched metal and earth. The sound of distant fighting reached them through the ruins, but here in this moment, there was stillness. He looked into its deep red eyes again and saw a flicker of something: gratitude, maybe trust. Whatever it was enough to confirm that protecting this creature was now his mission. The beast shifted its weight, lowering itself onto its front legs with a grunt of effort. Kane noticed fresh blood seeping from one of its older wounds, dripping onto the cracked stone. He knew if they didn't stop soon to treat it, the creature wouldn't make it far. He scanned the ruined buildings around them, searching for any shelter that could provide cover from the enemy. The shadows were long here, and parts of the structure still stood strong enough to hide them. He needed a place to work without being spotted. He found what looked like the remains of a storage hall, its roof partially collapsed but its thick walls intact. Motioning toward it, Kane began to move, keeping his rifle in one hand and gesturing for the beast to follow. It rose slowly, its movements stiff and deliberate, and limped after him. Every step it took seemed heavy, yet it moved with surprising care, avoiding stepping on debris that might make noise. Kane realized it was doing its best to stay quiet, as if understanding they were in danger. Once inside the storage hall, Kane guided the beast to the darkest corner. He checked the entrance quickly to make sure they weren't being followed. The air was cooler here, and faint beams of light filtered through holes in the ceiling, illuminating dust in the air. He set down his rifle and pulled a small medical kit from his pack. It wasn't designed for something of this scale, but it was all he had. He stepped closer, speaking softly to keep the beast calm as he prepared to touch the wound. The moment his hand pressed gently against the damaged flesh, the beast tensed, letting out a low rumble. Kane paused, meeting its gaze again, and waited until it relaxed slightly. He cleaned away dirt and dried blood as best as he could, then applied a regenerative gel from his kit. It hissed on contact, and the creature flinched, but did not move away. Kane wrapped what little bandaging he had over the wound, knowing it was only a temporary fix. Still, he could already see a faint improvement in the way it held itself. As he worked, Kane kept thinking about the alien soldiers' determination to kill this creature. They hadn't treated it like a wild animal. They had treated it like an enemy of great importance. That meant it wasn't just a random beast caught in the war. There was a history here, one he didn't yet understand. He wondered how many battles it had survived, how many scars told stories of conflicts far older than the one they were fighting. Now the beast let out a slow, deep breath as Kane finished tending to the wound. It lowered its head toward him, close enough for him to see every intricate detail of its scales. In that quiet exchange, Kane felt something unspoken pass between them. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about loyalty. He knew without question that if they got out of this alive, the bond they had formed would not be broken easily. Suddenly, a faint metallic clatter echoed from outside the storage hall. Kane froze, his hand going instinctively to his rifle. The beast raised its head, eyes narrowing as it listened. The sound came again, measured steps, careful but heavy. Someone was approaching. Kane moved to the side of the entrance, keeping low and steadying his breathing. The beast shifted its body to shield him from view, its tail curling protectively toward the doorway. A shadow passed across the light at the entrance. Kane gripped his rifle tighter, ready to fire if necessary. The figure stepped into view, one of the alien soldiers, alone, scanning the interior with a weapon raised. Before Kane could act, the beast let out a sharp, echoing growl. The soldier froze, eyes widening in sudden recognition. For a split second, all three stood still, locked in a tense standoff, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Kane knew the next few seconds would decide everything. He could attack, drive the soldier away, and risk revealing their position to the others. Or he could try to end this encounter quietly, protecting both himself and the beast without drawing the rest of the enemy here. His finger hovered over the trigger as his mind raced, the weight of his choice pressing heavily on him. Kane lowered his rifle a fraction and raised his empty hand, showing he did not want to fire. The alien soldier tracked the movement with a tense jaw and steady aim. The beast stayed still, but its tail edged forward like a shield between Kane and danger. Dust drifted through the thin beams of light as all three listened to the distant thunder of battle. Kane kept breathing slow and clear so his voice would not shake when he spoke. "I do not want to fight," Kane said in a calm tone. The soldier's eyes flicked from him to the wounded beast and back again. Kane kept his words simple, letting the meaning ride on his open hand and steady stance. He tapped his chest and then pointed toward the beast as if declaring his choice openly. The soldier understood the gesture and his face hardened, but his finger eased off the trigger. The beast gave a low rumble that quivered along the stone floor. Kane reached back and touched the hot scales with his palm to steady it. He felt that strange warmth again, like a tide rolling from the creature into his skin. The soldier noticed the touch and frowned as if something sacred had been broken. He said one sharp word in his language, then took a small step closer while keeping his weapon lowered. Kane risked a glance at the wound he had wrapped. The gel had begun to settle and the bleeding had slowed. He pointed to the bandage and then to the soldier's medkit hanging from a belt. His meaning was simple: help would be accepted. The soldier hesitated, eyes studying the beast's face for any sign of a trap. Then he unlatched the kit with deliberate care and slid it across the floor. Kane crouched and opened the field pack. Inside were patches of biofoam, a sealant injector, and a compact sprayer marked with warning glyphs. He showed each item to the soldier before he used it. The beast shifted, but did not pull away as the sealant stung and set. Kane whispered steady words while he worked, not for meaning but for tone. The creature watched him the whole time like a mountain trying to learn the shape of wind. When he finished, the beast's breathing steadied and the red glare in its eyes softened. The soldier's posture changed as if a weight slid from his shoulders. Kane pointed to the creature and then tapped 2 fingers over his own heart. The soldier replied by flattening his hand and moving it in a slow circle over his chest. Kane could not translate the word, but the gesture felt like a name spoken with quiet respect. He repeated the circle and gave a small nod to show he understood. Muted footsteps approached outside, and the soldier snapped his head toward the door. He raised 2 fingers and pressed them to his lips, asking for silence without a word. Kane nodded and pulled the beast farther into shadow. A patrol passed the entrance, voices clipped and hurried. The soldier remained motionless until the sound faded. Then he turned back and pointed toward the rear wall where a cracked service tunnel lay, hidden behind crates. He made a short map in the dust with the edge of his boot. A line curved from the tunnel to a ravine beyond the ruins. He marked a symbol near the ravine and shook his head firmly, warning them away. Then he drew a different path that skirted the mark and ended near a river. Kane repeated the safer route with his finger to show he would follow it. The soldier wiped the marks clean and checked the door again with careful eyes. Kane stood and gave the soldier a small salute born from habit rather than rank. He did not know if the alien would understand the sign, but the man gave a short nod in return. Kane rested his hand on the beast once more, and a steady warmth flowed into his palm like a heartbeat answering his own. The creature lowered its head until its brow touched his shoulder for the briefest moment. The soldier watched with quiet awe, as if witnessing a legend come alive. They moved toward the tunnel with slow steps, the beast careful not to scrape its flanks against the stone. Before Kane slipped into the dark, he looked back. The soldier was already at the entrance with his weapon raised, ready to mislead any patrol that searched inside. Kane lifted his hand in one last silent thanks, and the soldier dipped his chin once. Then the human and the ancient beast vanished into the cool passage toward the river and the uncertain road ahead. The tunnel air was damp and cool, a sharp contrast to the burning ruins they had left behind. Kane moved carefully, his boots crunching on loose gravel while the beast's heavy steps echoed against the walls. The faint trickle of water reached his ears from somewhere ahead. He kept one hand on his rifle and the other brushing the tunnel wall to stay oriented in the dark. The beast followed close, its breath steady, but still carrying the weight of its injuries. Small cracks in the ceiling allowed thin beams of light to spill into the passage. Dust drifted lazily in the shafts, making the air seem almost still despite their movement. Kane glanced back often to check on the beast, noting that it no longer stumbled as much. The medical supplies from the soldier had done more than he expected. Each time their eyes met, the creature seemed to watch him with the same focus he used to scan for threats. After several minutes, they reached a section where the tunnel had partially collapsed. Kane stopped, raising a hand for the beast to pause. Rubble blocked most of the path, but a narrow gap remained near the ceiling. It was just wide enough for Kane to squeeze through. The beast would not fit without clearing debris. He studied the stones carefully, worried that any wrong move might cause the rest of the tunnel to cave in. Still, there was no turning back. Kane pointed to the larger rocks and then to the beast's massive forelimbs. It seemed to understand. With slow, deliberate motions, it began to push the stones aside. Each movement was precise, almost surgical for something so large. Kane realized this was not the first time the beast had moved obstacles like this. It worked in silence, the sound of shifting rock filling the tunnel. Within minutes, the gap widened enough for them both to pass. Beyond the blockage, the tunnel sloped downward. The air grew fresher, carrying the scent of running water. Kane felt a flicker of hope. If they could reach the river the soldier had marked, they might find natural cover and a way to move unseen. He kept his pace steady but his senses sharp. War had taught him that hope often hid danger in its shadow. The beast moved beside him now, not trailing behind, its eyes scanning ahead as if it too expected trouble. They emerged into a cavern lit by faint blue light from glowing mineral veins. In the rock, in the center, a stream flowed across smooth stone before disappearing into another tunnel. Kane crouched by the water, filling his canteen and splashing some onto his face. The beast lowered its head to drink, the sound of its deep gulps echoing. Softly, for the first time since they met, Kane saw it in a moment of peace, free from the strain of constant fighting. As they rested, Kane noticed markings carved into the cavern wall. They were old, weathered by time, but still distinct. Symbols, unlike any he had seen in his travels, yet they stirred something in him. The beast followed his gaze and rumbled low in its chest. It stepped closer to the carvings, touching them lightly with its claw. Kane realized these markings might be a part of the creature's past, a memory preserved in stone. Whatever war it had fought before, it had not started here. A distant sound broke the calm, a faint metallic clink carried by the tunnel wind. Kane froze, listening. The beast lifted its head sharply, nostrils flaring. The sound came again, closer now. Kane moved to the shadows at the edge of the cavern, rifle ready. The beast positioned itself between the noise and Kane, its muscles tensing despite the pain. They waited, breath slow, as the sound resolved into footsteps, From the tunnel opposite the stream, 3 alien soldiers emerged. Their weapons were lowered but ready, their eyes locked on the beast. Kane saw no malice in their faces, only caution and something that looked like recognition. The lead soldier spoke a short phrase, the tone almost respectful. The beast gave a low growl in reply, a sound deeper and more resonant than the one it had made before. Kane realized he was witnessing a conversation older than the war around them. The soldiers did not advance. Instead, the leader stepped forward, placing his weapon on the ground before kneeling. The other 2 followed. Kane tightened his grip on his rifle but did not fire. The beast's eyes softened, and it stepped past Kane toward the soldiers. Kane's heart pounded as he realized the truth. The creature was not just a survivor of some ancient battle. It was something far greater, a figure from their history that commanded not fear, but reverence. The beast stood before the kneeling soldiers, its massive frame casting long shadows in the cavern's blue glow. Kane held his breath, uncertain whether this was the start of peace or the prelude to betrayal. The creature lowered its head slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The soldiers seemed to take this as a sign, bowing even lower until their foreheads nearly touched the stone floor. Kane's grip on his rifle eased, though his eyes never left their hands. The leader spoke again, his voice deep and steady, carrying a weight Kane could not decipher. The beast responded with a series of low rumbles, each one echoing through the cavern like the sound of distant thunder. It was communication, slow and deliberate, almost ceremonial. Kane felt as though he was watching 2 worlds bridge an ancient divide. The soldiers' faces shifted from tension to reverence, as if they were in the presence of something sacred. One of the soldiers reached into a pouch and pulled out a small metal emblem. It was worn and scratched, yet it glinted faintly in the cavern light. He placed it carefully on the ground and pushed it toward the beast. The creature leaned down, its breath stirring the dust around the object. A deep, resonant growl escaped its throat, not of warning, but of recognition. Kane realized this emblem was no ordinary token. It was a piece of the beast's past, perhaps. Proof of its place in their history. The beast tapped the emblem gently with its claw before turning its gaze to Kane. The look was almost human in its clarity, filled with meaning Kane could not fully grasp but instinctively understood. It was as if the creature was asking him to witness, to remember, to carry this moment forward. Kane gave a small nod, committing the scene to memory as if etching it into stone. The soldiers slowly rose to their feet. The leader spoke a few final words, his tone softer now, before stepping back toward the tunnel they had come from. None of them made a move to attack. Instead, they left the emblem behind, retreating with slow, deliberate steps until the darkness swallowed them. Kane stood in silence, listening to their fading footsteps, until only the steady rush of the stream remained. The beast moved to the emblem, nudging it once before lifting it in its jaws. It carried the token to Kane and placed it at his feet. Kane crouched and picked it up, feeling the cool weight of the metal in his hand. He turned it over, tracing the alien markings carved into its surface. They were intricate, telling a story in a language he could not read yet somehow felt. This was not just a gift, it was trust made tangible. Kane slipped the emblem into a secure pouch on his belt. The beast gave a slow blink, a gesture that somehow felt like approval. Without a word, it turned and began to walk toward another tunnel, branching from the cavern. Kane followed, glancing back only once at the place where the soldiers had stood. He knew the war was far from over, but something had shifted. The lines between enemy and ally were no longer as clear as they had been hours ago. The tunnel they entered was narrower and steeper than the one before. Water trickled down its walls, the sound masking their footsteps. Kane could feel the air growing colder as they climbed. His mind kept returning to the soldiers' behavior, their choice. To kneel, to leave in peace, to give up something valuable. It told him the beast's story was far older and far deeper than the current conflict. He was walking beside a living relic of power and memory. At last they emerged into a high mountain pass. The air was thin and sharp, and the view stretched far across the fractured landscape. Kane could see the river below, winding like a silver thread through the ruins. The beast stood at the edge, its gaze sweeping over the horizon as if searching for something. The wind caught its scales, making them shimmer faintly under the pale light. Kane stepped up beside it, the emblem's weight a reminder of the path they had chosen together. Whatever lay ahead, Kane knew they would face it as one. Not as man and beast, not as soldier and weapon, but as two survivors bound by a shared defiance against the forces that sought to break them. The war might still burn across the land, but here on this ridge, they stood as allies in a truth that neither side of the conflict could yet see. The wind along the mountain pass carried the distant scent of smoke and the faint echo of battle. Kane adjusted the strap of his rifle and scanned the terrain ahead. The path wound downward through jagged rock formations, offering both cover and danger. The beast moved with measured steps, its injuries slowing it, but not halting its progress. Every now and then it would pause, lift its head, and test the air as if tracking something unseen. They descended into a narrow gorge where shadows pooled between high cliffs. The silence here was heavy, broken only by the crunch of stone underfoot and the faint drip of water from above. Kane kept his eyes moving, wary of ambush. The beast's tail swayed slowly behind it, brushing the walls. He could feel its alertness, the same edge in its posture that he carried in his own. This was enemy territory, and both of them knew it. Halfway through the gorge, Kane spotted movement at the edge of his vision. A shape darted between rocks, low and fast. He swung his rifle up, signaling for the beast to stop. Another figure appeared, then another, until a dozen alien soldiers emerged from the shadows. These were not the kneeling kind, they wore darker armor, their visors reflecting no light. Their weapons were already raised, their formation tight and precise. Kane could tell from their stance that there would be no talking this time. The beast stepped in front of Kane, growling low. The sound reverberated off the canyon walls, making the air feel heavy. The soldiers hesitated for a fraction of a second. But then their leader barked an order. Energy bolts flashed through the air, striking the stone and filling the gorge with bursts of light. Kane fired back, his shots forcing them to scatter. The beast lunged forward, its massive claw striking the ground and sending shards of rock into the air. The fight became a blur of motion. Kane ducked behind a boulder, taking quick, precise shots to cover the beast's movements. The creature moved with surprising agility for its size, sweeping enemies aside with its tail, or knocking their weapons away. Still, Kane could see it was straining. Its wounds slowed it just enough for the soldiers to keep pressing the attack. They were trying to drive it into a corner where its size would become a disadvantage. A blast struck the rock behind Kane, showering him with fragments. He rolled to another position and caught sight of two soldiers aiming at the beast's exposed flank. Without thinking, Kane broke cover and fired, hitting one and forcing the other to retreat. The beast glanced at him briefly, its eyes flashing with something more than gratitude. It fought harder, as if fueled by his presence, matching his determination. Strike for strike. The tide shifted when the beast reared back and unleashed a roar that shook loose dust from the cliffs. The sound was not just noise, it carried a force that made the soldiers falter, their formation breaking for the first time. Kane seized the moment, advancing with rapid shots that drove them back. One by one, the dark armored figures began to fall or retreat, until the last of them vanished into the maze of rocks beyond the gorge. Silence returned slowly, broken only by Kane's breathing and the soft rumble of the beast's chest. He lowered his rifle, scanning the area for any sign of a second wave. The creature stepped closer to him, its head lowering until their eyes met. There was a shared understanding in that look. Victory here had not been certain, and it had been won only because they had fought together. Cain reached out and touched its scales, feeling the steady thrum of life beneath. They moved on, leaving the gorge behind and entering a valley scattered with the remains of ancient stone pillars. The air here felt different, lighter somehow, though the war was still not far away. Cain could see the sun breaking through gaps in the clouds, casting sharp beams of light onto the valley floor. The beast walked beside him now instead of ahead, its steps matching his. In that quiet, Cain realized something important. The creature was no longer just surviving, it was choosing its path alongside his. Far ahead, the valley narrowed into another pass, and beyond it, faint plumes of smoke marked where the front lines still raged. Cain knew they would have to cross into danger again soon. But after everything they had faced, the idea no longer felt like marching towards certain death. It felt like walking into the next chapter of something greater than the war itself, bound by a loyalty that no enemy could break. The smoke from the distant battle rose in twisting columns, fading into the gray clouds above. Cain studied the shifting sky, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. The beast stood beside him, its head held high despite the marks of their journey etched into its hide. The emblem the soldiers had given him pressed lightly against his chest from inside his pouch. It felt less like an object now and more like a promise he had sworn to keep. They entered the narrowing pass, the walls rising sharply on both sides. The air grew cooler here, and the wind carried faint echoes of clashing metal and shouting voices. Cain kept his rifle ready, scanning every ridge for movement. The beast moved with deliberate care, each step quiet despite its size. Its eyes darted upward often, watching the cliffs as though expecting danger to descend from above at any moment. Halfway through, they found the source of the smoke. A small outpost lay in ruin, its defensive walls shattered and the ground littered with debris. Cain could see scorch marks from heavy weapons and tracks where bodies had been dragged away. He moved cautiously, searching for signs of life. The beast sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring, then gave a short growl and looked toward a collapsed section of wall. Cain followed its gaze and saw movement among the rubble. A wounded human soldier struggled to push himself free, his uniform torn and blood on his forehead. Cain hurried forward, dropping to one knee to help lift the debris. The beast lowered its massive head, using its snout to shift larger pieces of stone. Together they freed the man, who stared at the creature in stunned disbelief. Cain spoke quickly, assuring him it was an ally. The man nodded weakly, too exhausted to question, and leaned against Cain for support. Cain knew they could not linger. Enemy forces would return to finish what they had started here. He helped the soldier onto the beast's broad back, the creature lowering itself to make the climb easier. Once the man was secure, Cain took point, leading them out of the ruins. The beast followed without hesitation, moving with surprising gentleness to avoid jostling its wounded passenger. The soldier clung to its scales, his eyes wide at the strange safety it offered. The path ahead led them to a ridge overlooking the battlefield. From here, Cain could see both human and alien forces clashing in the valley below. The sound of weapons echoed upward, mingling with the roar of engines and the distant cries of the wounded. The beast watched silently, its gaze fixed not on the chaos but on something deeper within it. Cain felt a shiver run through him, sensing that the creature's connection to this war went beyond simple survival. They skirted the ridge, avoiding direct sightlines from the valley. As they moved, Cain noticed the beast's pace slowing slightly. It wasn't from injury this time, but from caution. The air felt charged, as though something unseen was drawing nearer. Cain signaled for a halt and crouched low, scanning the horizon. A formation of alien soldiers appeared in the distance, but instead of advancing, They stopped and spread out in a wide arc, leaving a clear path through the center. From the middle of their formation, a single armored figure approached. Armor was older, more ornate, and carried the same symbol as the emblem in Kane's pouch. The figure removed their helmet, revealing an alien with sharp, angular features and eyes that glowed faintly in the fading light. They spoke a single word, and the beast responded with a deep, resonant call. Kane realized this was no enemy commander. It was someone who had once fought alongside the creature, long before this war began. The armored figure stepped closer, their expression one of solemn respect. They reached out and touched the beast's face, and for a moment, the years between them seemed to vanish. Kane stood back, understanding he was witnessing a reunion that bridged centuries. The figure turned to him then, speaking in broken but clear human words. "It remembers," they said, "and so will we." Kane nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle in his chest. When they finally moved on, the valley behind them faded into shadow. Kane walked beside the beast, the rescued soldier resting quietly on its back. Whatever battle still lay ahead, he knew their journey had already changed the course of more than one life. The beast had been ready to die, yet here it stood, carrying not only its own survival, but the weight of those who now believed in it. Kane looked at the horizon and saw not just war, but the beginning of a future they would shape together.